Hello everyone, now let us discuss about heart failure. In the current session, we will be focusing on pathophysiology, compensatory mechanisms, and the classification of stages of heart failure. Heart failure is a chronic progressive condition in which the heart muscle is unable to pump enough blood to meet the body's needs, or can do so only at elevated pressures. Is a chronic progressive condition in which the heart muscle is unable to pump enough blood to meet the body's needs and can do so only at elevated pressures. And sometimes heart failure is described as a condition where hardening and stiffening of heart muscle itself, which blocks or reduces the blood flow to the heart. It is a collection of symptoms that weaken your heart. It can affect the right side or the left side of your heart or both at the same time. It can be either acute, which is for short term, or chronic condition. In case of acute heart failure, the symptoms appear suddenly but go away fairly quick. And this condition often occurs after a heart attack. It may also be a result of a problem with heart valves that control the blood flow in the heart. In case of chronic heart failure, the symptoms are continuous and do not improve over time. The vast majority of heart failure cases are chronic. Coming to the symptoms of heart failure. The symptoms can be broadly categorized based on the cause, whether it is due to forward failure or backward failure. Whenever there is low cardiac output or low output, it leads to forward failure. The symptoms associated with forward failure are fatigue, dizziness, muscle weakness, and shortness of breath. And whenever there is increased filling pressure, which leads to congestion of organs upstream of the heart. This leads to backward failure, and the symptoms associated with backward failure of heart are peripheral or pulmonary edema, maldigestion, and ascites. Now coming to the general symptoms of heart failure, they are excessive fatigue, sudden weight gain, loss of appetite, persistent coughing, irregular pulse, heart palpitations, protruding neck veins, abdominal swelling, shortness of breath, leg and ankle swelling or edema. Coming to the types of heart failure. Most patients with heart failure are diagnosed exclusively on the basis of symptoms. Under these conditions, it is not possible to differentiate between heart failure with reduced ejection fraction HFrEF, that is nothing but heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, which is also called as systolic heart failure. And the next case is heart failure with preserved ejection fraction HFpEF, which is also called as diastolic heart failure. Moreover, other diseases associated with similar symptoms can therefore wrongly be categorized as heart failure. Example of such condition is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is nothing but COPD. As we have discussed earlier, the heart failure is of two types, systolic heart failure and diastolic heart failure. Whenever the heart failure is associated with reduced ejection fraction, here the ejection fraction is less than 50%, it is called as systolic heart failure. And whenever the heart failure is associated with preserved ejection fraction, here the ejection fraction is normal, that is greater than 50%. This is called as diastolic heart failure. Coming to the causes of systolic heart failure, the heart failure is not a single disease entity but a clinical syndrome that represents the final pathway of multiple cardiac diseases. The most common reason for systolic heart failure today is ischemic heart disease, which can either cause acute myocardial infarction or chronic loss of viable heart muscle. The other associated reasons are chronic arterial hypertension, valvular disease, genetically determined primary heart muscle defects, which are nothing but cardiomyopathies, viral infections, especially that are associated by cytomegalovirus and possible parvovirus, excessive consumption of alcohol, cocaine, amphetamines, and cancer drugs such as doxorubicin and trastuzumab, even monoclonal antibody directed against growth factor receptors like HER2 or ERBB2. These are some of the conditions and toxins that can cause systolic heart failure. Coming to the causes of diastolic heart failure. A systematic echocardiographic determination of left ventricular ejection fraction in thousands of patients with heart failure revealed that about 50% patients' ejection fraction is greater than 50%, and still the patient has had typical heart failure symptoms, including the acute decompensation with pulmonary edema, and even the survival prognosis is not much better or identical to the patients with reduced ejection fraction. That is nothing but systolic heart failure. And due to the difficulties in defining diastolic function by standard techniques, the term HFpEF has been introduced, which is nothing but heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, and it applies to patients with typical heart failure symptoms and normal or mildly reduced ejection fraction. Coming to the causes, or the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction or diastolic heart failure is typically associated with arterial hypertension, ischemic heart disease, diabetes mellitus, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and it is more frequent in women than in men, and there is a strong increase in prevalence with age. Coming to the general causes of heart failure, they are myocardial infarction, coronary artery disease, valve disease, idiopathic cardiomyopathy, viral or bacterial cardiomyopathy, myocarditis, pericarditis, arrhythmias, chronic hypertension, thyroid disease, pregnancy, and even septic shock. These are some of the general causes of heart failure. Coming to the left-sided and right-sided heart failure. The left-sided heart failure is more common type. Here it occurs mainly because the left ventricle pumps oxygen-rich blood to rest of your body. And the left-sided heart failure occurs when left ventricle does not pump efficiently. This prevents your body from getting enough oxygen-rich blood. And the blood backs up into the lungs instead, which causes shortness of breath and a buildup of fluid. That is nothing but pulmonary congestion and edema. Coming to right-sided heart failure, the right ventricle is responsible for pumping blood to your lungs to collect oxygen. So the right-sided heart failure occurs when the right side of the heart cannot perform its job effectively. It is usually triggered by left-sided heart failure. And the accumulation of blood in lungs caused by left-sided heart failure makes the right ventricle work harder. This can stress the right side of the heart and cause for its failure. It is marked by swelling of the lower extremities, and this swelling is caused by fluid backup in legs, feet, abdomen, which is nothing but peripheral edema. Left-sided heart failure is marked by pulmonary congestion and edema, whereas right-sided heart failure is marked by peripheral edema. Coming to the pathophysiology. Heart failure occurs when the cardiac output is insufficient to meet the demands of tissue perfusion. The main reason is the heart failure occurs when cardiac output is insufficient to meet the demands of tissue perfusion. It is a progressive disease with gradual deteriorating cardiac performance. It causes a decrease in cardiac output. This results from a decline in stroke volume that is due to systolic dysfunction or diastolic dysfunction or a combination of two. Coming to the pathophysiology associated with systolic dysfunction. Systolic dysfunction occurs when there is deficient pumping action of ventricles. The ventricles are unable to develop sufficient wall tension to eject adequate quantities of blood and get progressively dilated. This makes ventricle more ineffective according to Laplace equation, which is given by wall tension is equals to intraventricular pressure into ventricular radius. Because the ventricles are progressively dilated, there is a deviation in this Laplace equation. And the common causes of systolic dysfunction are coronary artery disease, myocardial infarction, and loss of functional myocardium. The other causes are valvular incompetence, dilated cardiomyopathy, viral myocarditis, and arrhythmias. The systolic dysfunction results from a loss of intrinsic ionotrophy, which is nothing but the contractility, and it occurs most likely due to alterations in signal transduction mechanisms that are responsible for regulating ionotrophy. Here you can see the pathophysiology associated with systolic heart failure. A major decrease in cardiac contractile function or a decrease in cardiac output leads to the activation of neurohumoral systems, which include sympathetic nervous system, renin-angiotensin system and vasopressin, and they acutely stabilize the blood pressure and organ perfusion by stimulating cardiac output, constricting the vessels, resistance vessels, decreasing kidney perfusion and increasing sodium and water retention. But unfortunately, those responses are malabsorptive, causing chronic overloading and overstimulation of failing heart. This neurohumoral responses, they cause overloading and overstimulation of failing heart. This increases the heart rate, force and blood pressure. Additionally, the direct hypertrophic, proapoptotic, fibrotic and arrhythmogenic effects of noradrenaline and renin-angiotensin system or angiotensin II further accelerate this deleterious process, and hence they may lead to systolic heart failure. In contrast, the concomitant release of ANP and BMP, which mainly occur due to the stress in the heart, due to the stretch and increased wall stress in the heart, they have opposite and beneficial effects. Coming to the diastolic dysfunction. The diastolic heart failure occurs when the heart muscle becomes stiffer than normal. The stiffness is usually due to heart disease, and it means that your heart does not fill with blood easily. It can lead to lack of blood flow to the rest of the organs in your body. The diastolic heart failure is more common in women than in men. In case of diastolic heart failure, the ventricular wall is thickened and it is unable to relax normally. The ventricular filling is impaired and the stroke volume is reduced, but the ejection fraction is normal. Coming to the common causes of diastolic dysfunction, they are long-standing hypertension associated with aging and myocardial stiffening. The other causes are aortic stenosis, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, AV shunts, and CHD. The most patients in long-standing cases, they have both systolic and diastolic dysfunction. Now you can see the pathophysiology of diastolic heart failure. The diastolic heart failure, as we have discussed earlier, it is primarily associated with hypertension, diabetes, coronary artery disease of microvessels and obesity. Hypertension leads to overload. Diabetes leads to oxidative stress, RAG activation. And coronary artery disease of microvessels leads to disseminated ischemia, and obesity also contributes to overload. RAG is nothing but the receptor for advanced glycosylation end products. So diabetes leads to oxidative stress and RAG activation. All these three, increased overload, disseminated ischemia and oxidative stress and RAG activation, leads to cardiomyocyte hypertrophy, cardiomyocyte stiffening and interstitial and perivascular fibrosis. And one of the important point is the principal cause pathological associated with the principal pathophysiology associated with diastolic heart failure is compromised relaxation of ventricles, which is nothing but diastolic relaxation deficit. These cardiomyocyte hypertrophy, cardiomyocyte stiffening and perivascular fibrosis leads to diastolic relaxation deficit, and this reduces the regulatory reserve and it leads to pulmonary congestion, peripheral congestion, decreased output, shortness of breath. And one more important point is the pharmacological agents which are shown here, they are found to be clinically ineffective in directly treating the diastolic heart failure. But in turn, they are helpful in controlling the conditions, other conditions that are associated with diastolic heart failure like hypertension, diabetes and obesity. The systolic dysfunction is related to impaired contractile properties, whereas diastolic dysfunction is related to inability of ventricles to fill because of decreased compliance. Both systolic and diastolic dysfunction result in higher ventricular end diastolic pressure, which is nothing but increased filling pressure, which is the characteristic feature of heart failure. And this increased filling pressure serves as a compensatory mechanism by augmenting the force of contraction and therefore stroke volume by Frank-Starling's mechanism. And this mechanism helps to maintain stroke volume. However, if the systolic or diastolic dysfunction becomes too severe, then the capacity of this mechanism to maintain stroke volume becomes exhausted and the stroke volume can decline significantly, which has deleterious effects. And in some cases of heart failure, example is dilated cardiomyopathy, the ventricle can dilate to very large volumes through remodeling as an attempt to maintain stroke volume and to limit the increase in end diastolic pressure. But whenever these conditions prolong, they have a negative effect. Coming to the cardiac and vascular changes that are associated with heart failure. The cardiac changes that are accompanied with heart failure are decreased stroke volume and cardiac output, increased end diastolic pressure, ventricular dilation or hypertrophy, impaired filling, which is mainly due to diastolic dysfunction, and reduced ejection fraction, which is mainly due to systolic dysfunction. The vascular changes that are accompanied in heart failure are increased systemic vascular resistance, decrease in the arterial pressure, impaired organ perfusion, decreased venous compliance, increased venous pressure and increased blood volume. Now coming to compensatory mechanisms. Neurohumoral activation is very important compensatory mechanism in heart failure because it helps to maintain the arterial pressure. The neurohumoral responses include activation of sympathetic adrenergic nerves, activation of renin-angiotensin system, increased release of antidiuretic hormone and atrial natriuretic peptides. The net effect of these neurohumoral responses is to produce arterial vasoconstriction to help maintain arterial pressure, venous constriction which leads to increased venous pressure, cardiac stimulation and increased blood volume. So the compensatory mechanisms during heart failure and the mediators which lead to these compensatory mechanisms are, in case of cardiac, they are Frank-Starling's mechanism, chronic ventricular dilation or hypertrophy and tachycardia. In case of autonomic nerves, they increase the sympathetic adrenergic activity, reduce the vagal activity of heart. And in case of hormones, renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, vasopressin, circulating catecholamines and natriuretic peptides. All these hormones, they aid in the compensatory mechanisms. The first one is elevation of filling pressure by Frank-Starling's compensation. The result is increased stroke volume. For short term, it might be beneficial, but long term leads to congestive symptoms such as venous engrossment, hepatic enlargement, peripheral and pulmonary edema, dysopnea, renal congestion and oliguria. The next one is augmentation of sympathetic tone. The augmentation of sympathetic tone is mainly achieved by beta receptor mediated cardiac stimulation and alpha receptor mediated vasoconstriction. The long-term congestive symptoms which result from augmentation of sympathetic tone are cardiac myocyte apoptosis, fibrotic changes, increased afterload and reduced or restricted cardiac output. The next is activation of renin-angiotensin system. The effects are vasoconstriction and left ventricular hypertrophy. The congestive symptoms are myocardial remodeling, cell death, fibrotic changes which are caused by raised levels of angiotensin II. The next is overproduction of aldosterone. Aldosterone mainly contributes to sodium retention, potassium loss, and fibroblast proliferation. The congestive symptoms are ventricular remodeling. The next is endothelin production is increased. This leads to vasoconstriction. The congestive symptoms are cardiac and vascular myocyte proliferation followed by fibrotic changes. Heart failure, finally heart failure also triggers release of natriuretic peptides which are nothing but ANP and BMP due to atrial and ventricular distension. This ANP and BNP, they oppose the vasoconstriction and sodium retention and they have beneficial effects in heart failure. Although these neurohumoral responses, they serve as important compensatory mechanisms, they can also aggravate heart failure by increasing ventricular afterload, which depresses the stroke volume, and increasing the preload to the point where pulmonary or systemic congestion or edema can occur. And some of these mechanisms, such as sympathetic activation and increased angiotensin II, they can stimulate cardiac remodeling that may be beneficial in short term, but it is harmful in long term. So this is the overall picture of pathophysiology of heart failure and associated compensatory mechanism. So the reduced cardiac output from heart failure, it triggers carotid baroreceptors and triggers the activation of renin-angiotensin system due to low renal perfusion. And this carotid baroreceptors, they increase the activity of sympathetic nervous system. And activation of renin-angiotensin system leads to release of renin release. Which is done by first is angiotensinogen is converted to angiotensin 1 and this angiotensin 1 is converted to angiotensin 2 with the help of angiotensin converting enzyme. And this has vasoconstriction and increased BP. This increases the afterload for the heart. Angiotensin 2, it contributes to increased activity of sympathetic nervous system and it leads to vasoconstriction and increased blood pressure, which increases the afterload for the heart. Additionally, this angiotensin 2, it helps in the overproduction of aldosterone, which leads to sodium and fluid retention and myocardial fibrosis. And it also aids in the release of antidiuretic hormone, which leads to fluid retention. So overall, the vasoconstriction and increase in BP, sodium and fluid retention and myocardial fibrosis and fluid retention through antidiuretic hormone, all these three, they contribute to negative remodeling of heart and they worsen the left ventricular function and lead to heart failure. Coming to the classification of stages of heart failure. One of the initial classifications of heart failure is done by New York Heart Association. The New York Heart Association, it categorized heart failure into 4 classes. Here, it is class 1 is associated with left ventricular dysfunction but no symptoms. Class 2, here the symptoms occur at medium to high level of physical exercise. In case of class 3, the symptoms occur at low level of physical exercise. In case of class 2, the symptoms occur at medium to high level of physical exercise. In case of class 3, symptoms occur at low level of physical exercise. So class 4 is the final stage. Here, the symptoms occur even at rest or during daily life physical activities like brushing of teeth. So New York Heart Association classified the heart failure stages into class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4. Additionally, American Heart Association and American College of Cardiology, AHA and ACC, they have further classified heart failure in 4 stages: stage A, stage B, stage C and stage D. The stage A is, here the patients are at high risk of heart failure but without structural heart disease or symptoms of heart failure. They are at high risk of heart failure but without structural heart disease or symptoms of heart failure. The patients have associated hypertension, atherosclerotic disease, diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, any of these conditions. And here the therapeutic goals or the objective of therapy is to provide heart healthy lifestyle, prevent vascular and coronary diseases, and to prevent left ventricular structural abnormalities. These are the aims of therapy, which is governed at treating stage A, heart failure. In case of stage B, heart failure, structural heart disease is seen but without symptoms or signs of heart failure. Here there is an existing structural heart disease, but symptoms and signs of heart failure are not seen. Here the patients are associated with previous myocardial infarction or left ventricular remodeling, which include left ventricular hypertrophy or low ejection fraction, and asymptomatic valvular disease. Here the treatment goals are to prevent heart failure and prevent further cardiac remodeling. And coming to stage C, here structural heart disease is associated with prior or current symptoms of heart failure. The patients are associated with known structural heart disease, heart failure, and heart failure signs and symptoms are also seen. Here, the goals of therapy are to control symptoms, to prevent hospitalization, and to prevent the mortality. Now finally coming to stage D, this is the final stage and it has a different approach. This is a stage of refractory heart failure. Here the patients are associated with marked heart failure, symptoms occur even at rest and they are recurrent. Even recurrent hospitalization is seen despite guideline guided medical therapy. Here the goals of therapy are to control the symptoms, to improve heart related quality of life, HRQOL, and to reduce hospital readmissions and to establish end of life goals. So these are the 4 stages, stage A, stage B, stage C and stage D of heart failure that are classified according to American Heart Association and American College of Cardiology. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for further videos on pharmacology and other related pharmaceutical sciences.